Morality. Morality in EVE Online is a very fluid and subjective concept. Since EVE Online is a purely sandbox game with only one server that everyone shares, it can be highly competitive in almost every aspect. Every EVE player has certain motivations that can vary widely, but those motivations will always be in conflict against others with competing motivations. This is a breeding ground for behavior that in civilized society would be considered dishonorable, immoral, and sometimes outright evil. That is not to say that there are extremely good people who are honorable, helpful, generous, and more, but there are players who throw all those principles to the wind. These styles of gameplay make the game very interesting and are not violations of the rules. Very much like you would in real life, to be successful in EVE, you must prepare yourself to deal with these shady players. This doesn't mean that there are bad people in real life at all, but in EVE, they are the worst. Here are the 6 most dangerous, notorious, or evil player types, and I will have some honorable mentions at the end of this video. Remember, this is mostly my opinion, and I'm going to dodge the political bullet by not calling out any particular names. Number 6. This is easy. The Scammer. Scamming is an old profession in EVE, and it can make certain players space rich in a very short amount of time. There are many different types of scams. The most common type you'll see in the big trade hub known as JITA is in the form of a custom contract buy order, where the contracts are deceptively named or composed to trick you to buy something of no value. Other scammers may ask you to invest a small amount into their secret trade capital, and will double your ISK, or interstellar credits, and then they'll give it back to you. They'll honor this investment several times until finally, when you give them your money, they don't give it back. There are a great variety of creative scams in EVE. I don't consider this to be the most evil profession because it has been a part of the game mechanic for a long time, and it's sort of par for the course. The scam is the first thing a new player should learn to be aware of. If an offer is too good to be true, usually it is. Number 5. The Bad Leader. Now there are a lot of people who have high aspirations in EVE. Maybe, at least in a simulated space universe, they think they can become great, powerful leaders. But imagine, you've joined a new corp or alliance, perhaps you've been there for a while, perhaps not. Suddenly the CEO of your corp demands strange things of you. Maybe they want you to attack something or fight a war that you would lose. Maybe they want you to join an alliance that no one in the corp likes. Maybe he had your mining corp thrown into the militia and you find yourself in faction warfare. Maybe he or she overdelegates and have you do all the drudge work. Maybe it's all about them, and be damned what you or any of your corpies want. Leadership in EVE can be every bit as complicated and challenging as in real life. It takes genuine skills. Many leaders in EVE do what they do for the purpose of ego or attention, not to create content or for the betterment of the corp member. Be aware of the bad leader. Number 4. The Grefer. Now this covers a wide swath of players. A Grefer is basically someone who lives for the misery of others. The more you are miserable, the happier and hungrier the Grefer gets. If your ship is destroyed by one of these guys and they laugh in your face, it's best not to complain or cry at all. This is called tears. They live to drink your tears. There are entire groups of griefers who are looking for the weak and vulnerable to attack. Sometimes they call themselves mercenaries. Don't be fooled. Skilled mercenaries go after people for the ISK or for a good fight. Griefers go after things like noob alliances or mining corporations, easy targets. And often, they'll do this over and over again. These people usually live in high-sec because the average EVE player believes they are mostly safe under the protection of the Concord police. Don't be fooled. An official declaration of war will bypass any high-sec protection. Also, they can suicide gank you and allow Concord to destroy their cheap ship. But in the time before Concord arrives, they've slaughtered your comparatively pricey mining barge, hauling ship, freighter, or missioning ship. But this is still not the most evil or dishonorable type of EVE player. This is another game mechanic that's common, and you must either learn to deal with the Grefer, don't give them any tears, avoid them, or join them. Number 3. The Corp Thief. This can be an extremely dangerous type of player. Any Eve corporation that has lots of assets in their station hangars or citadel stations are vulnerable to these players. For most Eve corporations, it's highly convenient to share your corporation resources when they're needed. This includes fuels, building materials, ammunition, and especially ships. Some corporations share ships as expensive as jump freighters, dreadnoughts, and titans as a matter of course. A corp thief infiltrates your corp. They may or may not genuinely like you, but they will always butter you up so they can get roles into the corporation that will give them access to these corp assets. It may take them weeks, months, or even years to gain access to these assets. And again, they may even be your friend, but they cannot ignore their basic nature. All those expensive ships sitting there for the taking are irresistible to them. One day you'll log in and find your corp hangars are empty, and said corp thief has left your corp. Sometimes they deny it, sometimes they are apologetic, and still want to be your friend. Ha! Fat chance of that, right? Sometimes you never see or hear from them again. Number 2. The Tyrant. Now this is an interesting type, but I've seen it before. This is kind of similar to the bad leader mentioned before, but normally a bad leader causes an organization to fall apart relatively quickly. This is not always true with a tyrant. Sometimes tyrants run the most successful player alliances in Eve, for the tyrant is a leader with a certain charm that causes a cult-like following. They'll often demand your time, your isk, your resources, and your blood. And if you don't give it, you'll be attacked, yelled at, ostracized, or abused in any number of creative ways. The tyrant usually has a lot of in-game power, and will use that to intimidate you should you ever cross him or betray him, or her for that matter. Tyrants never last forever though. Sometimes it takes years, but eventually he will be toppled. Usually it takes a major betrayal or a civil war, and this leaves the average player caught in the crossfire. This can cause grief for dozens, hundreds, even thousands of players under the control of any one tyrant. Number 1. The Betrayer. Unfortunately, betrayal is quite common in Eve. The worst kinds of betrayers are the ones that bundle all of the other 5 notorious types into themselves together. Not only will they betray your corp, they may be a tyrant with a lot of charm but few genuinely good intentions. The betrayal may take the form of ganking a corp member or ally, they may steal from the corp, and they may scam you. The longer you've known this betrayer, the worse it is. Often a betrayer has been your so-called friend for years. The worst betrayers do what they do as a huge surprise. While you think they're your friend, they backstab you and take all your stuff and try to farm your tears all at once. If I were to call any type of Eve player immoral, with the most probability of perhaps being a not-so-great person in real life, it would probably be the betrayer. Now there are many factors that could lead people to betrayal. Sometimes betraying a tyrant is for the better in the long term. Sometimes it forces people to be wary and hardened against actions that could be much worse further down the line. But the betrayer certainly causes the strongest emotional reactions for better or for worse. Now on to some other types of Eve players. Now there's a lot of variation here, but I will explain why certain Eve players you might think are notoriously evil are not really all that bad. I'm kind of hard-pressed to call gankers in high-sec the ones that are not trying to get tears or grief from you, but only want your assets and your blingy ship all that evil. This is simply high-sec piracy. Besides, it's selfish to believe that just because you're a space-rich mogul, that others shouldn't share in your wealth every now and then. What about gate campers? Gate camping has been around in Eve for a long time. Gate campers can certainly destroy lots of ships that are going through certain pipe systems in low-sec or null-sec. If you need to travel through low-sec or null-sec, a strong gate camp can ruin your day if you happen to run into it. But if you need to travel through low-sec or null-sec, there are ways you can avoid or run through the gate camp, such as scouting, cloaking mechanics, or just a better route. These are things you can learn in the game. If you neglect those skills, then you should play more skillfully. What about low-sec pirates, or the general criminal with a security status of -5 or less? Just because someone is a criminal doesn't mean they are immoral. It mostly means they're an extremely aggressive pilot. There are many people simply hunting for a good fight in Eve. They live for the fight. They live to improve their flying skills and do better. In the best of cases, if you're a noob, you'll get clobbered by one of these people, and then they'll refund your ship, and sometimes even scoop the ship modules from your wreck and give them back to you. And even of more value, they might even teach you how to be a good fighter yourself. This is how I prefer to play. But if you're going into low sec or null sec, you must take responsibility for the risk that entails. Now that wraps it up, and like I said before, probably most EVE players are very good people. In real life, even the worst of the worst are usually great people. But it is understood that the EVE universe is a dangerous one. Trust must be verified and earned. You must expect those who will try to take advantage of you. This is what makes the game satisfying in a very odd sort of way. Above all, remember that it's only a game, right? It is only a game, isn't it? Thanks for watching, Space Friends. Consider becoming a patron on Patreon through the link below. If you are afraid in EVE Online, fly safe. If you are brave, fly dangerous. And if you are one of those 6 notorious types mentioned, good hunting. I don't consider it to be the most evil because it... Retake. I don't consider this to be the most evil profession because... Retake. Maybe he or she delegates... Retake. Retake. Allow Concord to destroy their cheap, hi-fi... Retake. In other words, attack you with their cheap, hi-fi power... Retake. In other words, go ahead and attack you with their cheap, hi-fi... Retake. Also, they may suicide gank you and allow Concord to destroy their cheap, hi-fi power ship. Retake. Also, they might suicide gank you